The topics that are decided on the capstones are decided by the students. It is something that also adheres to whatever program that they're in, so it has to be approved. And every student then selects a capstone and also is paired up with an advisor who has a subject matter expertise in the area and can help them navigate through writing this capstone and the research and those types of things. So what I want to do is introduce, first of all, I'm going to introduce the capstone presenter, which is Marianne Winterholt, I can't say that second name, Winterholt Carr. And I'm going to read this a little bit, so make sure I have all of the information here. Marianne received her undergraduate degree at the University of Kansas in journalism and has over 20 years in advertising, design, branding, and consumer insight. She has worked exclusively for Fortune 100 companies such as Walmart, Kmart, Target, General Mills, Dairy Queen, and Whirlpool. She also has international experience consulting about the fundamentals of brand strategy with the Land O'Lakes USAID dairy producers initiatives in Macedonia and Azerbaijan. You're going to do that to me. Thank you. While at University College, Marianne received a 4.0 in Leadership and Organizations with a specialty in Strategic Innovation and Change. For over 5 years, she has also studied applied creativity and lateral thinking through the Creative Education Foundation. Marianne is passionate about her inspiring innovation in products, brands, projects, and people. Her topic today is called Innovating, the Innovation Matrix. It reflects this passion. So Marianne will be speaking. The first person that we're going to bring up here is Marianne's advisor, who very generously has offered to come today also, and he is Mr. David Frostman. He has more than 40 years of management, technical, and teaching experience. He's well known as a manager, business development executive, systems engineer, systems thinker, and teacher, and he has held a variety of senior technological and management positions in the aerospace industry, military, and academia. Since 2000, he has been an adjunct professor at University College, DU, for graduate studies in leadership development, change, leadership, innovation, and entrepreneurship, leading knowledge workers, team effectiveness, technology management, and project management. Wow. He retired in 2009 as a Major General in the United States Air Force Reserve, having served in a number of senior positions in the space development and operations arena. He is also Vice President for Strategic Initiatives for Stellar Solutions Incorporated, a fast-growing engineering services business providing high-impact support to the federal government and commercial industry in the aerospace industry. So I would like to welcome Mr. Frostman and have him come up here and give a little talk about the topic. And you need to hold this gold button down when you're speaking.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here and pleased to introduce Marianne's topic. It's an interesting one, I think, to me, and hopefully will be to you as well. What she doesn't say here is she's picked a radical approach to thinking about innovation. So we struggle with a lot of the words, innovating, radical innovation, what's radical, what's not, but the fundamental idea is that as a technologist, we've thought in business about innovation as something you bring new products to market or new services to market in some way that makes money. Otherwise, if you're in a for-profit business, that's what you're there for, to make money. So innovations are only good innovations if they actually are profitable in the for-profit world. This idea of corporate social responsibility comes at the problem a little bit differently. So how important is this? And how do I think about social responsibility in the innovation context? So that's what all of the work that Marianne has done for this capstone is focused on. And I think she's done a great job of really digging in and understanding how companies think about innovation and then how companies think about social responsibility and trying to figure out how to marry the two together. And you're going to see the result of that today. So without further ado, let me introduce Marianne and I'll let her have her time. I'm supposed to be the moderator for questions, so I'll be happy to do that if necessary, but I know she's going to field them all very well, so we'll do great. Thanks.
Thanks, David and Linda. My name is Marianne, and I just want to warn you guys that this isn't about defending my dissertation. This is all about getting you guys engaged and just giving you kind of the executive summary of the research I did. For anything specific about who said this and what year was that said, the paper itself will be available to you online after this, and we'll send out a little notice to everybody, as well as the video will also be available. So you can have those two resources after the fact. Also, because of the way this research builds upon itself, we're asking that questions be held to the end. So that way, perhaps we can, you may ask a question that will yet be answered in the presentation. We want to keep this informal, however, so I'm going to have some interactive questions with you guys. I'm going to ask you some questions. And so hopefully, this will be enjoyable for everyone. Okay? So thank you so much for that. And of course, David is my go-to guy if I need some backup. All right. Well, let's start with, in the beginning of this year, President Obama did his State of the Union address. And in it, he talked about how business needs to take innovation very, very seriously to bring the current economy out of its recession. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what he said.
We know what it takes to compete for the jobs and industries of our time. We need to out-innovate, out-educate, and out-build the rest of the world. We have to make America the best place on earth to do business. We need to take responsibility for our deficit and reform our government. That's how our people will prosper. That's how we'll win the future. And tonight I'd like to talk about how we get there. The first step in winning the future is encouraging American innovation.
Okay, so as you can see, President Obama, like the rest of us, feels that innovation is extremely important to the business as we are in this recession and come out of this recession. But let's talk a little bit about what is innovation? Why is it important? Who's it for? Who benefits from it? Everyone? Anybody else have another idea about that? Okay. Why do you think that everyone benefits from innovation? Who said everyone? Okay, then I'm going to ask you to back that up, Suzanne.
Well, I truly believe that to be innovative, you come up with something novel, something new and different. And if you do, it makes everyone's life better, I believe.
So I'd like to disagree a little bit.
Good.
I think there's got to be winners and losers. If you innovate something, most likely at some point you're going to drive somebody out of business or change the way they have to think. So if you're in a defensive position and you're seeing this new innovation come at you, you have to adjust to it, and sometimes companies aren't able to.
Okay. So that's a good question. We talked about companies. So where does innovation come from? Who's responsible for it? I'm sorry?
People.
People. Okay. All people? Everywhere?
Any person.
Any person can be responsible for it or?
Can be engaged in it.
Okay.
Be part of it.
Great. So how, we talked a little bit about defending it as a company. So how do we make innovation valuable? What are the criteria for value?
Does it benefit society?
Does it benefit society? Well, thanks for setting up my whole promise.
It also benefits the company, bottom line.
Okay, great. Anybody disagree with those ideas?
Sometimes. I said sometimes.
Sometimes.
The bottom line in the traditional sense, suffers, appears to suffer.
And I would also ask, does everybody think every innovation always benefits society? I see some heads shaking. What do you think back there? You.
I think that sometimes, innovation can pass people by.
Okay.
If we did like the Star Trek film did, and we had all these wonderful inventions, and nobody knew how to use them, or it was too expensive for them to put into play. So it's got to be. It's about timing as well. So.
Okay. Great. Well, yeah.
I was going to say innovation can be selfish sometimes. Like I was watching the Aviator last night. Howard Hughes is just really into aviation a lot for his own benefit. So sometimes it can be a pure art form or just an exploration of things.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you guys are all thinking about innovation the way I had to start thinking about it when I started this project. And I want to give you a little bit of background of where my inspiration about this particular subject matter came from. 6 months before Obama's speech, I attended a conference called the Creative Problem Solving Institute. And I've been going for about 5 years to this. And a Mr. Buchner, that's how I think he says his name, is a professional innovation consultant. And he did a presentation that provided a different point of view on the traditional innovation matrix, which we'll talk a little bit more, and you'll see what I mean by that. And so I'd like to share with you directly what he said about innovation.
What I'd like to do for the next few minutes is share with you some stories about two people that have helped shape my understanding of innovation, two ordinary people that have sort of forced me to rethink what innovation really should be. And I need my clicker. And those two people are a housewife from Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, and a farmer in Arusha, Tanzania. And before I tell you these stories, what I'd like to do is tell you what my definition of innovation was earlier in my career. And it's a pretty traditional definition for innovation, something that's new and novel, that creates value for some group of people, at a certain point in time. And I used models like this to describe the various kinds of innovation. And in this case, it's a 2x2 matrix. The x-axis is degree of newness to the organization, and the y-axis is degree of newness to the market. And using tools like this, we can plot various innovations and determine whether they're radical or semi-radical or incremental. And it occurs to me that the way that we talk about innovation, these kinds of definitions or these kinds of models, are really about the benefit that's brought to the organizations who innovate. So if we look at these two things, think about the Swiffer and how it made that housewife's life a little bit better. And if we think about the Moneymaker pump, the impact that it's had on this farmer and other farmers' lives is quite profound. And so I was struggling with how can we redefine innovation, not in terms of the benefit that it brings to the organizations that innovate, but to the effect that it has on the people that use the innovation. And so this is one way I think we can think about it. On a model like this, we might on the x-axis have degree of how much somebody's life is improved with the innovation. And the y-axis might be something like how much this innovation has increased the meaning in someone's lives. And I really believe that if we think about innovation in this way, we will aspire to do great things, and we will have benefit for the organizations that we're working with. The way that I'm now defining innovation, and the way that I think we should think about innovation, to aspire us to do those great things, is the implementation of an idea that improves someone's life and brings meaning to their life. Thank you.
So what's your reaction to that? What's your gut feeling about what he was saying? Does it make sense? What could be some holes in it?
That brings meaning to your life instead of given to interpretation.
And it's how narrowly or widely you define meaning to one's life. Is it just your life, or your community, or the world? I mean, how narrow is that?
Exactly. I see a gentleman back there.
Can't you measure the innovation somewhat by the individual or individuals that it affects? I mean, Mortimer Gaddafi, when he took over 42 years ago, his innovations were good for him, but they weren't good for the people.
Sure.
So we have a very great division between those that it was good for and those that it wasn't good for.
Exactly. You know, that's the questions that you're bringing up. I mean, I was really inspired by Mr. Buchner's thinking and approach, but yet there needed to be some work behind it to understand if it's feasible and what do some of that terminology exactly mean. He did say, you know, his new interpretation of innovation is the implementation of an idea that improves someone's life and brings meaning to their life. And as we discussed, how do you define that? He also took a look at this is called the Innovation Matrix. It's a model, and it's a 2x2 matrix, and so I just use the term matrix throughout. And the way he expressed what the traditional innovation model is that's the degree of newness to the organization versus the degree of newness to the marketplace. And that's how he described it in his presentation. And then he contends that if you look at it a different way with his new definition, it would actually, that old model primarily benefited the corporation or the organization that was implementing the innovation. He wanted to give it a more of a point of view from the customer or from the individual, and so he reworked that innovation matrix to have it the work of lifestyle improvement versus the improvement in the meaning of life. And that, because you would be working on that level with individuals, it would overall benefit society. He used a really good story to kind of give people a sense of what he's trying to demonstrate there. So in his traditional model, he used two examples. Swiffer Sweeper. Who here knows what the Swiffer Sweeper is? Who has one? Yeah. He worked with the inventors of the Swiffer Sweeper, and in his mind, they did a ton of consumer research on that. And Procter & Gamble reaped a lot of rewards from the Swiffer Sweeper because it was a new category, it was new to their business, and so that made it radical. It's radical because of its newness. It was new to the organization. They had never had a system product like that before, and it was new to the marketplace because it created a new category. So when something is a radical innovation, because of its newness, it has a higher risk factor, but it also, in this case, had a very high return on investment. He also brought up an example of the water pump that was in Africa. He said Tanzania. And in this, he talked about this water pump that was brought to these farmers. And they're sustenance farmers, meaning they only farm for themselves to feed their own families. And because this water pump wasn't new, it wasn't a new technology, and it was something certainly available in the marketplace before, in the traditional model, this would fall within the incremental innovation. Maybe the newness would come from they're offering it to these farmers versus somebody here in the United States. So it was an incremental innovation. But what Buchner contends is that if you took his new model of benefit to society and you replotted these innovations, you'd see something a little bit different. The water pump, which was incremental before, would actually now be radical in the way in which it provided lifestyle improvement and meaning of life to that farmer. Perhaps they could now become market producers and sell additional vegetables in the marketplace. It would free up time for their children to go to school and things like that. And so maybe they could actually hire other people to work for them. So in that sense, it would be a radical innovation on his new definition of the matrix. The Swiffer, on the other hand, which on the traditional innovation matrix was radical, would actually perhaps be allotted to an incremental innovation, because although some people may love their Swiffer a lot, could we say they really improved their lifestyle or brought meaning to their life? No, I don't know. You know, I could think. So this was his example, and I thought that was a very good way for him to explain what his premise was on why he feels this a better interpretation of the innovation matrix. So this, of course, led to my research hypotheses, the premise of my research. The first one is that his model is a valid way to reinterpret the traditional innovation matrix and to express customer value and social responsibility as important elements of defining innovation. In addition to this, and I think we talked about this before, about the idea that it needs to make money, a dimension of social responsibility should be included in innovation because it adds financial value to the organization. Because as we know, in business, you can't really go forward with something if it's not going to bring you financial value. So this was how I approached my research. My research is conceptual in the sense that it's supposed to bring up and inspire further discussion within the business community. I used all secondary sources to compare what Buchner was saying with other experts in the field who are in academic sources and credible sources in the business community, so that we could get a little more meat around what he was presenting in order to be able to either prove or disprove these hypotheses. So one of the things I think we need to go back to is what exactly is the traditional innovation matrix. In one of my favorite classes, we used this textbook, and actually David was my professor in that class. And in this textbook, and you can take a look at this, but I found this to be one of the best ways in which to understand innovation and how innovation can or can't make you money. So you can pass this around while this is going on and just take a look at that. But the authors of this book had a very specific way in which they expressed the traditional innovation matrix. And similar to what Buchner was saying, but I wanted to make sure that I worked from an academic source, a published source, a credible source, on going further in investigating the difference between his new innovation matrix and a traditional one. So as you can see, in their interpretation of the innovation matrix, on the x-axis is the business model, and on the y-axis is technology. And the way in which the types of innovation are defined are based on near to existing. So if you imagine that this corner is the status quo, and you go that way, how close you are to the status quo in either your current business model or in the technology that you're bringing to the marketplace. Another source that I use to investigate what is this traditional innovation matrix supposed to look like. This one is by George Day, and it's in a review from the Harvard Business Review that he did in 2007. And what he's saying about it is that the innovation matrix, you know, if you just laid the x and y axis over it, you could see that it's very similar to the other one. It's all about the probability of failure or risk. So if you imagine radical innovation up in this corner, you could see that when it comes to radical innovation, you have a 75 to 95% chance that it's going to fail. So his way of understanding the innovation matrix is in relation to risk. And I think that's a very common practice in business, because so much about innovation is about risk management and what it's, you know, the cost versus the reward. So there's some key concepts that I had to look at in my research. And one of them, of course, was meaning of life. We talked about that. What does that exactly mean? And then we looked at his terminology, Buchner's terminology of lifestyle improvement. Doing my research, the closest terminology that I could find research on that was similar to that was the quality of life. And I believe that this is, in essence, what Buchner was talking about. The next one, the key concept that I had to look at, was innovation and customer value. Because we're talking about the individual here and what value the innovation can bring to them. We're also looking at innovation and social responsibility. It's kind of the foundation of this premise. And then social responsibility and financial value. So let's look at meaning of life first. Meaning of life is considered a way of making sense of an individual's personal existence. It has, according to my research, relatively 4 parts: a sense of purpose, a feeling of efficacy, moral justification of actions, and a sense of positive self-worth. So that's kind of what, in a nutshell, meaning of life, the essence of meaning of life, or the definition of meaning of life. At Colorado State University, there is a professor, Michael Steger, S-T-E-G-E-R, who actually studies this in his lab. And it's kind of part of the positive psychology movement, if you're familiar with that. But what he's done is created a meaning of life questionnaire so that you personally can understand your own perception about the meaning of your own life in your life. Then there's the quality of life. Again, a very esoteric term, and the way in which the World Health Organization defines the quality of life is that it's an individual's perception of their position in life in context of the culture or society in which they operate or live. There's also part of that includes their goals, expectations, values, and concerns. And this also has to incorporate physical health, psychological state, level of independence, social relations, personal beliefs, and relation to the environment that they're in. This is a diagram of what one group of researchers put together of how the parts of examining the quality of life. So as we said before, it's pretty complicated terminology. It looks great when Buchner, it's very inspiring, but when you get into it, you see that it's everything from the subjective end of quality of life to the existential in the middle, from subjective to objective, going from well-being, satisfaction with life, happiness, meaning of life. Meaning is sort of embedded within quality of life, to biological order, realization of potential, fulfillment of needs. And some of these are observable, and I think that that's what makes this definition kind of helpful in that sense. So as you can see, it's just a very complicated terms that he uses. So I wanted to now talk about the next key concept, which is innovation and customer value. Is everyone here familiar with Peter Drucker? He's like the father of modern management theory. He did most of his work, I think, in the 60s. Is that correct? Yeah. So, it seems, as this Business Week cover says, his ideas still really matter in business today. And what he says about customer value is there is only one valid definition of business, and that is to have 2 basic functions: marketing and innovation. So when you're in business, regardless of what you're doing or what you're making or what service you're providing, you're really in the business of marketing and innovation, which is good for me because I'm in marketing. So I'm glad to know that. He also feels very strongly that a business is defined by the satisfaction they bring to the customer. So whether your customer is another business or an individual, it's important to know that it's your mission to serve their needs. So when you ask yourself, and I don't know if you've done this exercise yourselves, but what is our business? You have to look at that from the outside, from the point of view of the customer. For example, Zappos, who sells shoes, they're not in the business of selling shoes. They're in the business of customer service, is what they say. So they could sell anything. It's their customer service that sets them apart. And what the customer thinks and believes and wants at any given time is as important as any reports from sales, engineering, and accounting. So there you go. Yes, marketing. But as you can see, he's very passionate about the customer value in his recommendations for business management. This is a pretty typical definition of customer value. There was a lot of work about how to define customer value in the 80s and 90s. And it's what the customer gets relative to what the customer has to give up. Another gentleman who provided quite probably a deeper understanding of customer value as it related to my research was a gentleman named Holbrooks, and that customer value is relative to personal, situational, and comparative preferences, and it's characterized by their interaction with the product, service, idea, or place or thing. And Holbrooks claims that there's really two parts to customer value that you have to consider when you're defining the customer value, and that's what is the motivation? Is it intrinsic, which is internal, you're motivated by your own wants and needs, or it's extrinsic, it's motivated by something outside of you that you, for example, a mother is often extrinsically motivated by her children's wants and needs. And it's, again, the orientation of self or others. And here's an example of how you can apply that. This is Holbrooks' customer value model applied to organic foods. So over here you see the orientation of self or others, and you see across the top whether the motivation is extrinsic or intrinsic. And he's, in this relationship to organic foods, he's showing that it fits all four quadrants. So when you're looking at organic foods, from an extrinsic, self-oriented state, it's excellence. Organics are free from pesticides or residues. So that's a way of expressing the customer value that's extrinsic and self-oriented. Or other-oriented would be organics are a way to represent others' concern for the environment. And then intrinsically, it's the simplicity of the product or slow food. You could also say health. And organics are a way to contribute to environmental conservation. So this is a little bit of a way that Holbrooks actually describes all facets of customer value. I also wanted to take a look at how did customer value fit within the traditional innovation matrix as presented in our textbook that's going around right now. And so this is the model that's in the book. And one of the things that when you really start to understand this model at a deeper level is that value proposition, value chain, and target customer are all levers that you have to understand the impact of what you're doing in all three of these elements in order to inform the innovation matrix. So all three of these levers are actually part of how you consider whether it's new to the business model. Okay? In this matrix, the one that focuses on risk and the probability of failure, Day also includes a understanding of the customer and customer value in his intended market axes. So he proposes that you answer these questions in order to understand customer value and in how is the newness going to impact your risk of that innovation. So the next concept that we had to look at was innovation and social responsibility. One of the most important things that I think we needed to look at was corporate social responsibility specifically, and that can be defined as the efforts a corporation makes above and beyond regulation to balance the needs of stakeholders. And you notice that word is stakeholders, not stockholders, with the need to make a profit. Does everybody feel comfortable with this as a corporate social responsibility definition? Seems to make sense? Okay, great. Well, we also have to look at what Drucker said about social responsibility in the corporation. Economic purpose does not mean that the corporation should be free from social obligations. On the contrary, it should be organized as to fulfill automatically its social obligations in the very act of seeking its own self-interest. I think, you know, when we see things like from China when there's a poison in a toothpaste, is counterproductive to this definition that Drucker is trying to promote. In my research that was very compelling was case studies that I found about social responsibility and innovation. And I think probably the most famous one that everybody would be familiar with is Grameen Bank, the gentleman from Sri Lanka who won the Nobel Prize, who set up the microloan system. And that is a very good example of, he saw this group of people that were not being serviced by the financial industry, and he created a business model, which is microloans, to actually support them. And he always gets, their payback rate is like 95%. So it's profitable for the bank, as well as it's met a social need that was in the community in a way that had not been thought of before. Another example is a company in Mexico called Cemex, and they're a cement company, and they were responding to the desire of individuals who were low income to build their own homes. That's how their homes get built, is they build it themselves. And so they created buying groups, because what that allowed it to do is use the cultural need for acceptance within a city, within a village, so that the group themselves would work together to influence each other to buy products, to build the houses. And one of the things they found was, instead of selling the group a big thing of cement that everybody could use, they found that culturally it was important that everybody be able to have their own bag, so that they could set it in front of their home and show what a good thing that they were doing. And yet, in order to continue to pay their bills, the group itself would buy them all together. So it really filled a need that was very important to the community, but it also was an innovative way to sell cement to this group of people. A really important part of this research came from a gentleman named Michael Porter. Is everyone familiar with Michael Porter? He's like, he's Drucker for the 21st century. He, there's things called like Porter's 5, and he is extremely influential in business management and business strategy today. And I want to share with you what he has said recently. He also came out in January, just about the time that Obama was doing his speech. He published in the Harvard Business Review a theory that he has about this integration of social responsibility and how corporate social responsibility can evolve.
Welcome to the HBR IdeaCast. I'm Audie Ignatius, Editor-in-Chief of Harvard Business Review, and today with me is Professor Michael Porter of Harvard Business School, who's going to be talking with us today about an important new article in HBR about the next evolution of capitalism. Professor Porter, thanks very much for being with us.
Audie, my pleasure.
Now, your article is meant to fix a problem. What is the problem?
Well, the problem is, I think we've gotten into a very sort of vicious cycle in thinking about the relationship between business and society, and really the the purpose of capitalism and the benefits of the capitalist system to society and to meeting society's needs, like improving people's lives and improving the health of communities. And we've gotten into a cycle where I think business has evolved, and thinking about business management has evolved in a direction that we've kind of narrowed the scope of how you create economic value. And increasingly, companies are being perceived as creating profit at the expense of the community, not creating profit that actually ultimately benefits the communities. As a result of this, I think government has increasingly seen business as a problem, as a source of bad things in society, and the mindset has become increasingly to regulate, to control, to tax. And ultimately now, often political leaders are unable to pursue really business-friendly public policies because the political environment really almost forces them to be tough on business, despite the fact that we know at some deep level business and society need each other. But we've kind of gotten ourselves into a bad place.
But I think a lot of business people would argue what we do is run businesses, and we make profits, and when we're successful we hire people, and that's all we can do. I mean, to have an agenda beyond that is really outside of our scope.
Well, that has been the increasingly well-articulated view about the relationship between business and society over the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, Milton Friedman, famously argued that the social responsibility of business was to maximize its profits, and this simple act of profit maximization was good in and of itself. That was enough. That was sufficient. So what was good for business was sort of axiomatically good for society. But I think as we've seen the effect of business practices on things like health and nutrition and kind of the mortgage crisis, and there's example after example of where actually it's much more complicated than that. And yes, profit is not inconsistent with society's needs, but if you think about creating economic value in a narrow way, if you don't understand really the broader and more subtle and longer term influences on the ultimate sustainability of a firm's success, you can get into a situation where that profit really does come at the expense of society. And I think there's a backlash of society saying, wait a minute, we don't like this profit. I mean, all these companies right now, as you know, Audie, are reporting increasing profits, but there's no jobs. And the communities are saying, gee, it's great that, XYZ Corporation is making more money, but, what's in that for us? But we can see the layoffs, and we can see our local suppliers who have been, cut off and have to go out of business, and we can see all this development and pollution and strain on resources, and we understand that profits are good and somehow that we need capitalism, but there's this increasing I think tension between ultimately partners who actually are mutually dependent on each other.
Now the term you use is creating shared value, so talk a little bit about how that would work if it worked.
Yes. Well, the basic premise of this article is that we once thought if business just increases its profit, what's good for business is then good for society. I think what this article tries to say is really we need to kind of think differently. What's good for society is actually good for business. And that sounds like a play on words, but it's really quite a profound difference in perspective. The absence of shared value says that actually creating societal benefit is really a powerful way to create economic value for the firm, and that we've missed by and large many of these opportunities to create profit, let's call it the right way, profit that actually comes from meeting fundamental human societal needs. So, I mean, the most obvious example of that would be the environment. That, we used to think that, being environmentally friendly was a good thing to do. That if you were a good person in a good company and you were being responsible, that you'd worry about the environment. Well, we have companies now that are understanding that if they think about the environment, they actually save gobs of money by reducing energy cost and minimizing unnecessary logistics that they kind of somehow convinced themselves was a good idea in some theoretical view of how to globalize. We're seeing all kinds of examples that by actually creating products that are actually dealing not just with sort of contrived needs or trying to force products onto the customer, but if we actually create products that are actually good for the customer, you know, nutritionally good, environmentally good, help them save, help them, you know, raise their family in a better way, that actually that's the right way to make economic profit. And so the concept of shared value tries to focus on the tremendous opportunity to create economic value through creating social benefit. And one of the underlying premises is that you know, we've kind of maxed out on meeting the conventional needs that we've kind of taught ourselves to meet over the last decades. But we have vast needs in the world, not just in the developing world, but even in the advanced world. We have all kinds of people that are having issues of health and housing, and you know, and let's get busy mobilizing capitalism to meet those needs. And by the way, we can make a lot of money doing that. But that kind of profit creates shared value. It's not just profit at the expense of society or at the expense of a consumer. It's really profit by benefiting or benefiting the society and the consumer.
So essentially, his definition, Porter's definition of shared value, are policies and operating practices that enhance the competitiveness of a company while simultaneously advancing the economic and social conditions in the community in which it operates. Seems to make sense. He also feels that only through social progress will business be able to evolve and be successful in the future. It's his contention that corporate shared value will drive the next value wave of innovation and productive growth in the global economy. Sound good? Well, let's talk about social responsibility and financial value. Does doing good equal making money? Well, in my research, it found that corporations or for-profit organizations are not set up to manage money that they spend now in hopes of bringing change in the future. And that the way, I hate to say Wall Street right now, but the way Wall Street incentivizes companies is on a quarterly basis and not on a long-term basis. There's also a very lack of regulation or even rules and ways in which measuring the value of social responsibility within an organization. For every organization, there's a different way to measure it. In my paper, I go into more detail about some of the different ways to measure it, but they're all very inconsistent, and they're not even consistent within a single industry. So it's very difficult to understand what they call social return on investment. Although it's important, there's just no one who's cracked that code yet on how to do that. So let's look at, my results of reviewing all these key concepts in a nutshell. Meaning of life is an internal yardstick in which the context of culture and norms provides a definition of an individual's quality of life. Meaning of life is an individual's sense of purpose, sense of control over outcome, personal morality, and sense of self-worth. Quality of life is defined within the context of the society in which the individual operates or lives. Customer value, as we saw when we explored the traditional innovation matrices presented in my textbook by those authors and also by Day, is that it's already incorporated as a component of the traditional innovation matrix, whether you're looking at the business model access. Social issues, as we looked at in the case studies, can be a catalyst for thinking about or creating innovation in products and services. I think one of the things that Porter talks about is that you've heard about there's so few growth industries left because we've pretty much met every need that the consumer has expressed. However, there's an abundance of needs out there that are different than what most corporations consider is their realm of needs to address. So can those other needs out there in society, and as Porter said, not just in emerging countries, but here in our own country, be sources for innovation sources of inspiration for innovation? And of the key concepts, measuring the financial social responsibility still remains elusive. So let's talk about whether or not my hypotheses or premise for this research proved to be true or not true. Essentially, in research, you're always looking for that. And let's start with the second one first. A dimension of social responsibility should be included in innovation because it adds value to the organization. Does the research hold that true, to be true? No, it's still elusive. I don't think the research that I was able to do could definitively say that social responsibility would add. I mean, I think we feel that it could, and I think that our sense is that it should, but the research that I did not have any definitive answer to this question. Let's look at my first hypothesis or premise. Buchner's model is a valid way to reinterpret the traditional innovation matrix to express customer value and social responsibility as important elements of defining an innovation. And that's his reworking of the innovation matrix. Did I prove this to be true in the research? I see Suzanne shaking her head yes. And what makes you say that?
Well, I think that we can't really say for sure that it's going to be value added, but we can say that there's a model out there that we could perhaps aspire to.
Okay. Anybody have any other thoughts about that? I know one of the things we talked about was the complexity of these terms of lifestyle improvement or quality of life as I researched it, and meaning of life. So those still remain incredibly complex. The other aspect of this is his model does not reflect newness to the marketplace or technology as described by Day and as described by In Making Innovation Work, the textbook. So those are parts of this model that don't seem to be, that still are important to understanding the innovation matrix, but are not obvious in his new description of the innovation matrix. So this led to thinking about, is there a way to, as Suzanne was talking, evolve this matrix from where he started, Buchner started, and using some of the research that I found in understanding it. So here's his model. What if we took Holbrooks' theories of customer value and his matrix of customer value and applied it to some of the terminology that he's using there so that we can make sure that we're all using some research credible, academically vetted terminology. So maybe it would look something like this. Meaning of life improvement would incorporate Holbrooks' definitions of customer value in regards to orientation to the self and intrinsic motivation versus the quality of life with a value of orientation to others and a motivation that is external or extrinsic. And the nearness or farness from the status quo. One of the other things that we talked about in understanding customer value, meaning of life, and quality of life is that it's subjected to the customer cultural norms. So you have to look at that customer in the sense of, are you looking at them because of the job that they hold, or the neighborhood they live in, or their economic level, or their health issues? Are they cancer survivors? You know, what is the cultural norm in which you're going to define the X and Y axis? This still seems to be missing that technology part of the innovation matrix that is important. So what if there was a two-step approach for the innovation matrix? What if you defined your innovation matrix, defined your innovation on this matrix that included Holbrooks definitions, overlaid the customer cultural norms, and then use this information to inform your value proposition, your value chain, and your target customer. So in your evaluation of how near or far they are from the status quo, would all be part of your business model evaluation in the traditional innovation matrix as provided in Making Innovation Work. Does this seem reasonable? Have a two-step approach to this? It's awfully cumbersome, though, and complicated. And, you know, models are hopefully there to make things easier or telegraph information quickly. And Linda and I were having a conversation about this when I was reviewing this about, can you imagine walking into a CEO's office and going through this with them? I'm not sure many of them would have the appetite for that. So is there another way to evolve a model that could both incorporate the intention of Buchner's philosophy and his inspiring thoughts about innovation while meeting the needs of, you know, the financial value and including technology in that? And that made me think about applying Porter's shared value theory to the traditional innovation matrix. So where you'd end up is value to society versus value to the business. What's your reaction to this? Any thoughts, any feelings about this?
Well, who defines the value? I mean,
sure.
Definition.
Well, I call this the Marianne model, just out of, you know. It's not published anywhere either. So, but it made me think about that. It's like if we're you know, the business, of course, would have to understand the value of the innovation to themselves, and then understand the value that it's creating for the society or the group of people that they're trying to impact. One of the things that I think is missing from this was the fact that when we looked at the traditional model of innovation, particularly in Day's example, understanding innovation from a corporate standpoint is a lot about risk. And radical innovation is defined as higher risk, incremental as lower risk. And in this, risk doesn't really make sense when you look at a model in this way, because you wouldn't say the more value you brought to society and the more value you brought to a company would make it a riskier venture. So could we flip this and say that a model like this is more about probability of being successful? So in that sense, radical would not, on this model, radical would not equal high risk of failure, but on this model, radical would equal high probability of value to both. And so in that sense, it would be financially riskier to be incremental than it would be to be radical. Thoughts, feelings, opinions?
Aren't there some business ventures that I'm thinking of in the social entrepreneurial world where you're taking existing technology and just combining it together and applying it in a new way that then would equal radical?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but there's lots of things, and it is radical in this way, high probability of value to both business and society.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like it's incremental when you describe it.
On the traditional innovation matrix.
Yes, but it's not. So I mean, you kind of have to understand these terms in a new view of business worlds.
Right. Well, as I said, my research is not conclusive. It's in order. The purpose of it is to get the conversation going and to look at a theory that had a lot of inspiration to me personally, and it could take in many different paths of research. The social entrepreneur path was another area of research that could be linked to this and would be very important as a follow-up, as well as understanding a corporate view of this. So there's much more research to be done. But that's it. That's what I've got for you guys today. As we started with President Obama, we're in a tough time. You know, we've entered the second decade of the 21st century on the back of a recession. And primary tool, as Obama said, is that innovation can be a way for businesses to bring us all out of this recession. We also know that the innovation is a risky business, and that a lot of the consumer needs that businesses operate on have been met. That's why there's not very many growth industries left. A lot of them are mature industries. So could this different point of view or flipped way of thinking not only provide social value and ability for business to reach out and start curing some significant social needs and bring them the profit that they need while bringing benefits to society? So that's my research, and I appreciate you all listening.